So, you're finally going to learn how the EastWest Hollywood Woodwinds library work. You are going to become an expert on this stuff. Hi there, this is Sam with Second Tier Sound. Really nice to see you here. You know, I create videos on how to create music a lot easier in a DAW, so if that interests you, maybe subscribe if you haven't already. So, the EastWest Hollywood Woodwinds library. Perhaps not the best one that EastWest made, but still included in the big package, a really good library that has a lot to offer. So let's go deep into this library and learn each patch, what they all do, and how we can use it to its fullest potential. And also, we're going to talk briefly on how you manage RAM with the Play engine, something really important. Let's get going. Let's open up Play. And you will be greeted with all your libraries. You might have much more than I do. I only have the diamond here. Just wanted to add, though, that if you have the gold or the Composer Cloud, there might be some patches that I'm using that you do not have, but it all works the same. They have the same name, so you will understand everything I'm going through. Okay, so let's load up a simple patch. We can do flute. Before we go further, I want to show you something that is quite important. If you go to these three bars and you go into Sample Purge, this is very useful. If I played, let's say, a few notes here, if I click Purge, Play will remove all the samples I have not used. So you can see it didn't go to 0. So all the ones I have played are still in memory. And this is really useful because if you've made the whole, for example, oboe track, then you can click Purge and Play will remove all the files that you haven't used. And you can save RAM very effectively that way. If you want to then remove everything, you have to click Reset and then Purge. Now it goes to 0. And this is really helpful because if you have a template and if you have a full orchestra template with Play, it might take a while, especially if you haven't excluded your folder in your virus program, which is vital. But what I do a lot of times when I have really big templates is that I save the templates with all the samples purged, 0, and then the template loads up really fast because then I just go and click Reload on the samples that I want to use. Okay, so let's look at this sample library here. You have all the wind instruments. I would say that this library is more complete than most libraries out there, most orchestral libraries. You have flute, alto flute, bass flute, you have piccolo flute, you have the clarinet, E-flat clarinet, bass clarinet, and even contrabass clarinet. Bassoon, contrabassoon, cor anglais or English horn, and oboe. I hope I didn't miss anyone there. Let's look at all the subfolders that are here, because basically they all work the same. You might not find all the samples here, so some libraries have less patches, but the structure is all the same. And that's why we only have to look at Flute 2 and you will understand the whole library. Okay, so let's start with longs. Longs is basically non-legato, so you can play several notes at the same time. We have loaded this one already. I'm going to talk more what it means, but just show you that you can do several notes. I'm using the mod wheel there to get some dynamics. Normally Play Engine uses both the mod wheel and the expression. Expression in general is kind of considered the volume, but as you will see in some patches, it's good to know both of them and be able to control both of them. What does FL2 means? Well, it's just flute 2. And as you will see, all wind patches have abbreviation of the instrument in the beginning. And then it has legato repetition round robin 4. Now, this is not a legato patch, but it means that you are able to have smooth repetitions. And you have 4 kinds of repetitions. So if you hit the key 4 times or several times, you will hear there's a slight variation. And this is to hinder the machine gun effect, because if the attack is always exactly the same, it kind of starts to sound like a robot. Let's see if I can do this here. And stuff like that. So this patch is good for repetitions that are smooth. If they want to be even smoother, maybe you have to go into the key editor and just make sure the notes are just hitting each other so you get even smoother effect. So that's a good one for that if you need a lot of repetitions. Next one is sus accent. And that means that if you hit the key hard enough, if I hit it softly, there's no attack. So you have control of that. So you can do... It's very good to have that control. Next one, this one has expression, a little bit of a texture arc, and also a built-in vibrato. So if you go... It's a great little patch because you get a little bit more performance in that patch. Next one is basically the same, but no vibrato in there. Here we have a suspension as normal, no vibrato and vibrato. Full niente. It's a lot of stuff going on here. And you can see these three are sort of the same. There's just less. Here it doesn't say full, here it says full, and here it's adding niente. So they all sound the same, but they're controlled differently. And also they use a little bit less RAM. So you can see of three versions, highest version, middle, and lowest. So if you're interested in saving resources, you might want to look at which one should I use. So let's talk about them. We have two vibrato layers, no vibrato and vibrato. So if I load this one up and I have the mod wheel all the way down, no vibrato. All the way up, there's a vibrato. Now, you could try to make a smooth transition between them. And depending a little bit on the notes, because they're all sampled differently, this can be a little bit odd sometimes. It can be some phasing issues, and you can sometimes hear, oh, there the vibrato comes in. So my recommendation is to try to not do smooth vibratos like you do a dynamic layer. You have to experiment, but I find that it's best on or off, like on and off. But that's what it means. Niente means that if I use the expression and go all the way down, it disappears. You can see I'm still holding down the keys, but the expression is all the way down, so I hear nothing. And then I can go in again by holding it down. This is very good because you get more control of how you want the attack to be. Not just the accent, but even actually how the smooth or... You can also, this is hard to do manually, but you can also do repetitions this way. It's hard to do manually, but you can program that in later and it makes repeated notes sound very good, especially in legato. Okay, so full is the same thing. It just does not have niente. So if I go all the way down, I will still hear the flute. All the way down. And this last one is you have vibrato, but you can't control it. So this, you only need a mod wheel. So but it's all baked into one control. So the mod wheel is not just changing the vibrato, it's also changing the volume. So you will have louder and vibrato. And softer and no vibrato. And that's quite a good patch if you don't want to use all the memory and you don't want to have two controls like vibrato and dynamics. You just have one big control in the mod wheel. It's easier to control. But then obviously you will always have vibrato on the loud volume and no vibrato on the softer, which is quite natural, but you might not want that and you have less control. And the last one here, you have basically no vibrato control at all. There's no difference. It's always vibrato on. So even on the softer dynamics, there's still vibrato going on there. Okay? So all the control you can have. No niente, no real vibrato control, and absolutely no vibrato control. Here you have no vibrato if you go all the way down the volume, and here it doesn't matter. You see, so you can actually say there's 4 versions of the same patch here. That's how they all work. All the instruments have the same structure. Let's go into shorts. And I would say, just to save time here, if you want to skip ahead, just use this one. That's all you need. But let's still look at the other ones and why they're there. The good and the confusing thing about Play Engine is that they want to give you all the option. It's not just a patch to give you like, you can do this and this and this and that and this and that and so, which is cool sometimes. So if I start with the first one, it's a marcato. It's just a simple marcato. Sounds very nice. Sounds very natural. It's good to have this. Better than having, trying to do it yourself with a legato patch or a sus patch. The next one is just a staccato. Double tongue, it says over here. That means that you can play, even here, these patches quite fast and it will sound good. It has a round robin 9. That means that there's 9 repetitions, different samples. Here's only 4 and here's 9. So and then staccatissimo, it's just basically even shorter. And these sound really good. These are great. Short samples in general are not hard to make, but these are very good. So why do I say use this one instead? Well, because this patch has all of them. So you only need to load one. Now, what's the downside? Well, it uses more RAM, obviously. So if you know I'm just going to use staccatissimo, then obviously just load that one. You don't have to bother with this one. But otherwise, I use this one because it's a great workhorse. You get like 70% done of your work here. Because in the mod wheel all the way up, you have longs. And then a little bit further down, marcatos, staccato, and staccatissimo. Yeah? Oh, you have to work on the performance there a little bit, and then you get the dynamics with both the expression controller and how hard you hit the key. And that's something you cannot forget. It really matters how hard you hit the key. So you have a lot of control there. So don't forget, you have the velocity, the mod wheel, and the expression layer. All those need work in order to create good performances. Okay, that's the shorts. Then we have the effects. And basically, they are all the same. They just have different patches. Some of them only have key clicks. But here, you will find all your pre-recorded runs. Ottava run, major, minor, up and down. I'll talk about these later. But let's listen to a run, for example. And it sounds good. If you just want a quick run, that's an excellent one to use. I'm going to show another way later that gives you more options, up and down. Then you have repetitions. Repetitions, fast, medium, and slow. So why is there a number? Well, this refers to your tempo. So these repetitions, they're tempo synced. They sound the best around this BPM. So for example, this is a little bit fast. I have right now a tempo of 120. So maybe it's probably better to use the 121. You want to use the one that is closest to your tempo. And I don't know why this one takes so long to load. And it doesn't go on forever. I think it's like 2 bars and then it stops. And then you control that with a mod wheel. I don't use it that often, but it can be a quicker way to work than to perform it yourself. And it also sounds quite natural. Then we have trills. Half tone, you probably know about it. And whole tone, no problem there. And then whole tone run. So chromatic scale, basically. Right, that's pretty much the effect. Well, here are key clicks, which I never use, but can be interesting. You have to listen carefully here. Yeah, there you go. All right, Keyswitch, the one I never use. Well, I could see that the runs could be useful. If you like the pre-recorded runs, then you basically get a lot of them loaded in one patch. So This one I don't use. You might like it if you really love key switches. I mean, I like them too, but it's just that Play is not made for key switches. But they've still made a key switch patch where you're supposed to get most of what you need. But I find that it's tricky to use because I don't know what the key switches are. It just doesn't say anywhere. So I'm just pressing a key here and I randomly, oh, this might be the vibrato one. I mean, the vibrato is quite obvious, but it's just not that clear. And I also get a lot of things that I don't need or want, and it takes up a lot of RAM. So I rather use my own patches, and you can actually create your own patch instead. You just load up several instruments that you like in the same play engine, and then you can save that as a patch. That's what I do. Okay, so we have Legato. And as you can see, we talked before about the Niente. There's no Niente control, and there's no full control of the dynamics. And vibrato, you can see there's always those 1, 2, 3. These are all the same. And here's 1, 2, 3. They're all the same. And these are different here. And let me see, these 3 are the same, but with different controls. I hope you understand that, so we don't have to look at all of them. So let's look at the first one here, the accent. As you saw before in the longs, you have accent control. So if I hit softly the keys, if I then hit the key hard at the beginning of the phrase, if I hit harder, I have an accent, and that can be very useful. You can kind of use it as a staccato. It's not meant to be that way, but you could if you want to say, I just want to load one patch, and it can actually work. So then you don't have to load a staccato. Doesn't sound as good if you want to be a perfectionist, but it works. All right, same thing here. You have no Niente control, and here you have the vibrato baked in. Then you have the same idea as before, but it says AT, and that stands for auto tempo. And that can be a little bit confusing. What does that mean? Well, it basically means that the play engine will handle the transitions for you, the legato slur transitions for you. All these are legato slur. It's a legato with a little bit of slur effect. So it means if I play fast, the play engine is going to think, he plays fast. Then I'm going to give him a fast transition between the legatos. If I play slow, play is going to think, this sounds better having a slow transition. So if I play slowly here, it's quite subtle. Sometimes it works better than other times, but that's basically the idea. So you don't have to worry about how hard you hit the keys. You just perform fast or slow, and the play engine takes care of it for you. It's not a bad idea, and it works quite well. You can't go too fast, but I like it. I don't use it so much, and I'm going to tell you why later, but it's not a bad patch. It depends a little bit on how you work yourself. Then we have the expression one. And so this is nice because you get sort of an arc both in terms of vibrato and texture. So this is good for slower passages. Very nice, very beautiful. Great for slow passages, this one. Repetition is the same idea as we heard about in the longs. The whole point is that it's supposed to be easier to make repetitions in legato passages. And it works okay. But I have to be honest, I don't really see the difference between this one and other legato patches. I think the other legato patches do equally good a job. The main difference is that there are different repetition samples. So if you feel like it sounds too repetitive in your normal legato patch, then they use this instead. But I haven't really felt the need for it. Runs This is interesting. This is basically a way to then play your own runs, which is difficult to do manually. Doesn't sound so good. But if you program it in, it sounds pretty good. And the good thing about this is that then you can do your own modes, your own scales. You can have a different triplets, quintuplets. You have much more options. You can do much longer runs. I think it works quite well. Sometimes you can maybe hear there's a script glitch somewhere. But I've never had a problem when the flute is in the background, just doing a run up and down. Then it really works. So I actually use this way more often than the pre-recorded ones because I find it less of a hassle. Okay, the next one is actually the one I use the most myself. And this is the legato slur again and full niente as before, but it has velocity in there. So that means depending on how hard I hit the key, I will get different legato transitions. They're quite subtle, but if I play softly, if I play hard, very subtle, particularly noticeable if you do faster passages. If I play very softly, I like it because in a key editor later I can actually control this more. Where do I want a softer transition or a slower transition rather, or a faster transition? So that is the reason I prefer this to the auto tempo. But otherwise, this is kind of the same thing. It's just how you control it. Do you want to play to control it for you, or do you want to have your own control? EastWest give you a lot of options in terms of control. You can control everything, like the attack, the vibrato, decay, the transitions, which can be overwhelming. Maybe just want one patch and go, right? And then I will, for example, use this one here or the auto one here. Then you don't have to worry. It's just taken care for you. But some people, like me, want more control, and then EastWest give you that option. Okay. And then we have stack runs down here, which is the same as the slur runs, but it gives you staccato instead. Let's see if I can perform this. Yeah, better to program it in. So it gives you a staccato run, which sounds very good. I like it. Just one thing to notice, it doesn't work on arpeggios. Sounds really weird. It has to be notes that are next to each other. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So chromatic or scales work, but not arpeggios. So that's all the patches, pretty much. I mean, we looked at one folder, but the good thing to remember is that all of the instruments use the same system, the same subfolders, and the same names. So if you understand one folder, you got them all. I really hope you have a good understanding now on how to use these patches. East and West really gave you a lot of options, which is a good thing, and also can be quite confusing. I mean, what patches am I supposed to use? But what you have to think is like, what am I doing with this project? Do I need just one articulation? Do I need them all? Do I need to be able to control every little detail? Or do I just want a simple background sound? Or is it very important to me that I save as much RAM as possible? Now we've looked at all the patches. Let's look a little bit at the problems that this library has, because it's probably the worst of all the Hollywood libraries. It's still a good library, but it has some problems. So let's look at what they are and how we can solve them. One that is not so easy to hear, but when you use it a lot, you start to hear it. It's the legato. Let's try a legato patch here. Now, if you haven't paid attention to these things before, you might not notice what I'm talking about. What happens is that the legato transitions that come between the notes, sometimes they don't follow the dynamic layer. They're always one volume, so they pop in like like that. And it becomes really apparent that sometimes when you're trying to make smooth, soft legato lines. And this is a real problem. Quite annoying. And there's sort of a solution to that. You go in here on the player and you see that here are all the sounds that are included in this patch. The release samples and also the legato samples are here. So what you can do is that you basically lower that volume a little bit. maybe something like that, and that it won't pop in as much. It works quite okay. Another problem is their clarinet, which is probably the worst sound in this whole package. They really failed on that one. It is better than nothing. It is quite a good sound, but it has a lot of problems. And the biggest one is the phasing that is happening. I hope you could hear the phasing issue in the instrument here. If you don't know what phasing is, well, let's think about it. When you have several sounds that are similar to each other, when they play at the same time, the frequencies in those sounds can cancel each other out or create artifacts. Something you have to Google to understand more deeply. But what do you mean, several sounds? It's only one instrument, right? Well, these patches are basically several sounds that sound together. You know, all the dynamic layers, they are actually going on at the same time, especially when you change the volume or with the mod wheel or the expression layer. So when you fade between those, sometimes there are several sounds playing at the same time, which cause this artifact, this phasing sound that makes it sound like they're two instruments. And this is really, really tricky to do right. I don't think actually there's any library that have done it really well so far. And this is an older library, and they were just, one of the first trying this out. So they didn't really succeed. And woodwinds are extremely difficult to do well. For example, the Orchestra Tools Berlin woodwinds or winds, they have solved it by not having any dynamic layers. They just have one, and then the volume goes up and down. And that's one way to solve it. Newer libraries are doing better, but it's still difficult. Another thing that they don't mention anywhere is that there's no vibrato, which I don't get, because there's definitely vibrato in a clarinet. It's very important. It's true that in classical music, it's usually a lot less. It's not like jazz and klezmer music where you go full on vibrato, Never go fully vibrato. Anyway, but why don't they have it at all? So what they've done instead is that they have a texture change, which is quite nice. So in the mod wheel, it feels like it's louder, but it's basically a texture difference. It's a louder sound, not the louder volume, if that makes sense. And then they have the expression as well. So you can take the lower on the mod wheel, you can lower it down, so the softer sound, but you can still control that with the expression. And you can have the mod wheel higher and go. And also the clarinet has the same problem of the legato pop-in, as I call it. And I'm not entirely sure because I feel like I get different results, but I have found that I get less of phasing when I use only the mod wheel, only the texture. It's still there and the pop-in is still there, but I find that it's not as bad. When I use the expression, I find that there's way more phasing. And if the clarinet is just in the background without instruments, you probably will notice it. But if you're going to use this as a solo instrument, nah. If you really are looking for a clarinet, I will look into the Ember Tones solo clarinet. And I think a Dio has a decent one, and also the Fluffy Audio. But think about it, if you just need some normal winds in the background, the East West will absolutely do the job for you. One thing though you could try, and this is varying result, is that you take a long patch. Let's try that one. And then you go into the player and you press the legato sim. Now this is an old script that comes from, I think, the older orchestra library, and it's just still there. It's not something you want to use really, but you don't get the phasing at least. it's not near that realism that you would want to have. So it's a sort of solution. If you have nothing else and if you really need it, that is something you could do. So now you're an expert on this library. You really know how to maximize the RAM, how to use the Play engine, how to make sure it runs faster, and what patch to use. So you have no excuse to not go out and create great music. If you already have this library, make use of it. It's actually quite good despite some of its flaws. Oh, and by the way, I just heard that the Opus edition by EastWest will be released the 20th of April. Might be interesting. Let's see what that library can do. So if you like this kind of stuff, these kind of videos, then maybe you could support me by hitting the like button or perhaps subscribe if you want more videos. Actually, I intend to have more videos like this one explaining all of the libraries in the Hollywood Orchestra, so you will become an expert on how to use all of those. You can also follow me on Patreon if you would like to support me more and get some extra bonus content. Until next time, this is Sam signing out. Take care.